My next guest, Laura Rhodes-Levin, is a licensed therapist who specializes in the evaluation and treatment of anxiety, depression, and trauma. She holds a Master of Science in Counseling and is known for her unique approach in the understanding of anxiety and anxiety disorders. And she wants to help us understand anxiety, teach us how to work with it, and to, in fact, embrace it rather than fear it. And I quote, she says, anxiety is not what's wrong with you. Anxiety is what's right with you. In Laura's new book, The Missing Piece, Rewire Your Brain, Reduce Anxiety, and Recreate Your Life, she wants us to imagine a natural state of well-being and connection. And her goal is to help us find it and find more joy in life again, or maybe even for some, truly experience it for the first time. Welcome, Laura. What a great goal to undertake in a world where anxiety seems to be a middle name, not only for our youth, but for our parents and our grandparents alike, in a state of upheaval and unrest. I feel like we are in a bit. So I couldn't have a better guest right now than you. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, anxiety is abundant at the moment, but it's all doable. It's all doable. I think it was Churchill who said, "There's nothing to fear but fear itself."
Yes. It's really a true statement too. And I can say that at 54 years old. Sometimes we hear these things in life when we're younger and we don't keep your friends close, your enemies closer. I think at like 13 or 14, I was like, what the heck does that mean? There are things that you just don't understand in life until you have life experience and wisdom to understand that it's true. The one thing to fear is fear itself. But I do want to talk a little bit about what I think the positive is to what I call the Windex era. The glass is
Okay.
clean. We can see through really well, thanks to technology, social media. We really understand our neighbors. We really understand even our children maybe are talking more to us than they would in the past. I think that there's a positive in enlightenment and understanding when something is happening. So, hey, we are riddled with anxiety as a community, as a culture right now. But the good news is that you're here to help us understand that it kind of is a natural thing that we have in our body. Anxiety is a part of our natural being. But I just talk about how did you get here before we get into how you're helping everybody else? How did you find your way to really dig so deep into this particular field of anxiety? Just talk to us a little bit about your start.
Well, I was born with anxiety. I remember, being afraid there was a bear in my closet and it was really a hanger and a coat or something from the time I was so young. And in writing my book, and in doing the work I do, I've learned that a lot of anxiety is inherited. So sometimes we're born with it and we don't even know that we're experiencing someone else's trauma. And really, the way I've come to this is trying all the wrong ways to address my anxiety. And that includes drugs and alcohol and trying to fix myself on the outside as opposed to what's going on the inside. I had a heart attack. I mean, I went through a lot. And it's more than what goes on in your mind. And that's what I really want people to understand is that I wish it wasn't called mindfulness. I wish it was called sensefulness, because when we hear, at least when I hear the word mindfulness, I go to my mind, okay, how can I think differently? And it's really through our 5 or 6 senses that we're able to calm ourselves. I say this all the time, but if your dog was stressed out, you wouldn't sit it down and be like, what triggered you, Fluffy? Let's talk about it. You would soothe this animal, and we can
Yes.
soothe ourselves through sound, through smell, through sight, through touch. And that's what I had to learn, that I needed to learn how to be present in the moment and not get hijacked by my anxious brain.
Well, that's amazing that you were able to figure that out because, we have learned some of these things like the brain is a muscle. The brain is a muscle, so you can retrain it. I've had a lot of psychologists and therapists on the show, and they talk about that. Think about your brain as kind of cornrows. If your reaction is negative constantly, that you're sowing your seeds of negative, and so the brain learns to be negative, and you have to reteach it to think positive, to think with a different perspective. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Or can you talk about the brain, how you're retraining yourself?
Yes,
Basically what you
absolutely.
said.
I would consider it more of a corn maze than cornrows. Because it's actually not a muscle. It's this very complex series of matter and electricity.
Uh-huh.
And so what you're talking about is neuroplasticity. And so let's say you have negative thinking or a fear of spiders. I don't know.
Yes.
And so you enter the maze and your brain sees a spider and it runs in this one particular path that dead ends. And it dead ends with anxiety and phobia and irrational fear. And that's such a well-worn groove. And so what we're really doing is we're saying, here's the spider. Let's not go that same way. Let's hack a hole here where there wasn't one and create a new pathway where perhaps you free the spider and it eats the things that eat your roses.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
It's a new way. It's a new way of thinking, pretty much.
it is, and our brains are habitual. So, and we all know this. If we have to wake up at 6 a.m, then our brain wakes up at 6 a.m on a Saturday, even if we don't need to. So a lot of what our negativity and anxiety is habitual. It's just a groove that the brain is in. And with the right practice and with the right focus and tools, you can very easily, alcoholism is such a great example of this, right? So you're scared, you're frightened, something in your life doesn't seem right. Your wiring is you reach for a drink or a pill or a joint or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought of going any other way is not comprehensible and it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been sober 18 years. Now, when life hands me something that 2 decades ago would have caused me to drink, I don't even think about that anymore.
Yes. Yes.
I have all new pathways of what to do, which also have evolved over the years. It went from, call your sponsor and go to a meeting, although I still go to meetings, to, meditate and go outside and know that everything's okay. Just all sorts of different pathways
To move past the trigger.
to change the corn maze. So you come out the other end and you're like, I did it. Yay.
Right. And then you start to come out that end naturally when you see the spider, you let the spider out and realize it's going to help your roses.
Exactly. I think all of our fears are born of very primitive survival mechanisms. And most fears that I see people encounter today are financial and social.
Yes.
And so that basic need for safety, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
But the very bottom is physiological. So food and water and air. Those are the main things that
the bottom of the triangle, the biggest part.
After that, you have safety, which means you're not in danger. You have food and you have water and you have air, but there's still danger, which is a very primitive, not primitive, because it still exists today, but it's in that primal area.
Yeah.
And then right above that is love and belonging. And so that's our need for social acceptance. And I find that when we're anxious, we go to these worst case scenarios. I had a couple in my office. It's so funny because I can't tell you how many people picture themselves living on a bus bench.
Oh,
And there are people who do live on bus benches. I don't want to make that like, but most people who are coming into my office, that's never an
going to
option.
be their end.
It's
Yeah.
never going to be, but we go to these worst case scenarios because it's primitive thinking. And that's why I think a spiritual existence, a sense of hope, a sense of knowing that you're going to be okay, and taking the right actions. Because when you're coming from a fear-based place, you're shooting really low.
Yes.
Um, so getting out of those really basic spots can free up a lot of people, a lot of people.
That's so interesting because when you first were talking about Maslow's theories, at the bottom, it was like our basic needs, right? And I called it survival. But then you moved up and you said love and connection, which is also survival. But right? Because we can't survive without love and connection either. Certainly not a good existence or not for a long existence. But what I wanted to say is it brings me back to the brain that you talked about and the emotional center of our brain, which is what our creator gave us for survival, for fight or flight, right? Fear came into existence, that anxiety you call it, which is a fear-based emotion, can also come from survival, right? Like maybe I see the rat and I'm afraid that it's going to bite me and I'm going to die. You know what I mean? Like it's that primitive, let's say, but it comes from, but it's there to protect us. And I'm just connecting with what you said at the beginning, that I introduced you to at the beginning, that it's not, what did you say? It's not what's wrong with you. It's what's right with you.
Exactly.
So if you can understand that the anxiety is some sort of survival mechanism from your ancestors or from the moment or from life experience, and you can sit with it for a second, breathe with it for a second, acknowledge it is what they say, and then deal with it versus react. Is that a piece, a key to the small maze in the puzzle in the maze?
Absolutely. It's being able to recognize the difference between a lion and something in a lion costume.
Yes.
It looks like a lion, but it's not actually going to hurt us. And you bring up today's society and how inundated we are with anxiety, and our brains and our bodies have not adjusted to the lives we've created. Like we're
Yes.
not climbing the steeps for lavender and hunting mammoth. We actually have to invent movement in order to stay physically fit.
Hmm.
The opposite is true of our brains. Our brains are being asked so much on a regular basis. I've made a policy for myself that I only look at my phone 3 times a day, and I run a corporation,
Yes.
and I have a book out, and I have another business, and it can all wait, because if I am constantly you get like a brain fog.
Yes.
People text message you now, and it's not like leaving a message. They want instant results.
That's right.
And so our brains are overwhelmed. Our brains are just taking on too much. And so we get into everything seems like a lion because your adrenaline is constantly being dumped into your body, and cortisol.
And that can become addictive, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So not
yeah.
only the fact that these phones are built to addict us, but that sensation in itself becomes something that we look for, want more of.
I got
And
something done. I got something done. I got
yeah.
something done. Yes.
Ding, 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 award, reward. And because it's kind of how we were raised, right? And trained, and now they're feeding right into those patterns. But I love what you said about 3 times a day, because I know enough, and I have teenagers, one in college, one in high school, who were born when the iPhone was born. My firstborn was the iPhone and Jax were born the same year. And so the different experiences of the 2.5 year difference in the two children in the phone is marked, actually.
I
One's on
bet.
TikTok, one isn't, and it just, one understands the phone and its grip a little bit more than the other. But what's interesting is, for me, myself, trying to preach to my own children about screen time and stuff, I find myself now more than ever, and I'm starting to make these own boundaries for myself, that I pick up the phone for one thing, and 20 or 30 minutes later, I haven't even done that one thing. And
exactly.
Right. I mean, and so it is addicting me. It has got me in a way that it really does have our youth. And I watched my daughter, I just said something to her the other day. She doesn't brush her teeth. She doesn't wash the dishes. She doesn't do any of that without her phone. She does all that. Thank God, I'm a lucky mother, but not without a phone present to just constantly be feeding her brain. And we'll put that on the side burner for a second, because I do want to talk about our youth. But I also see it in my mother, who's upwards to 82 years old, and is constantly, when she's not golfing, she is on her iPad. She's also addicted to her iPad. She'll come visit us as a family, and she'll hang out with us in the living room. I'm like, Mom, everyone's in the kitchen making dinner or something. And she'll be in there, and then she'll make her way in. And then after 20 minutes or so, if we don't engage her, I see she winds up getting up and making her way back into the living room, because the iPad is actually more entertaining than we are in her brain somehow, I have to guess. Talk just a little bit about this true, very real, very in front of us situation that's not only happening to our youth, but it's happening to you and me. We just talked about, and it's happening to our aging population. What are we going to do?
So let's start with the youth, because it's something I deal a lot with parents and young adults and teens, this whole, are they on the phone too much kind of thing. And I remember when I was a kid, the first thing they handed a kid at a restaurant was crayons and a menu to distract.
Puzzles.
Like, keep that kid quiet, and oh, look, you found a word.
Yes.
So I don't know that there isn't, it's not just a more advanced version of that.
The crayon.
The other side of that is I don't think that people of my generation, so I'm 57, you're 54, I don't understand. And I have to learn that kids today are up from 11 to 4 on their phones. And it is actually their social interaction.
Yes.
And you can't fight technology. I mean, it's going to happen. So we're not going to know till much later what impact this has. And I suspect the pendulum will swing the other way, and a lot of kids will go off grid.
Right. Kind of like alcohol right now is downtrending. We start to really believe, oh, wait, maybe what these people are saying is true.
Well, and so I think everything in moderation, right? Mm-hmm. The most important thing, I think, for anybody's age is to be connected with your body. If it's promoting anxiety and lack of sleep and stress and all that kind of stuff, that's no good. And when you're, but it can be connection. I don't, as much as I'd love to say I meditate all the time, and I promote meditation, I would be lying if I said that was my first go-to. I see it work, and I know that it can work for me. But for me, it's more about nature. Like, my higher power, my creator is the universe. Yes. If I'm not feeling right, it's either curling up by a fire or going out and taking a walk and just looking at flowers and watching things going by. Or water has a tremendous impact on us, whether it's the beach or a river or a lake. I think that it's important to expose your kids to the gifts of nature. And sometimes they're resistant to that, for sure. Yes. Mm-hmm. And some people are going to be into it and some people aren't, but it's such an important tool. And we have to understand that our kids are communicating in a way that we never, ever did.
Thank you so much for that, because I think, again, it's the perspective and the flip side. Clearly there are positives to it, and you're right. We're not going to know what it means. The human body also changes. We're living a lot longer. Like a lot of things evolve and change. So I appreciate. It's a matter of moderation. It's a matter of sharing with your children, which I am definitely going to do, because I talk about it all the time. And I haven't said it to my daughter about her phone, is listen to your body. Like, I can't tell you if you feel anxiety because you've been on your phone and you're not sleeping because you're up watching Grey's Anatomy or whatever you're doing. You know why you're tired. You know if you're not sleeping. And so empowering the youth, which is what that's the only thing they want from us, is to give them their independence and freedom. I really, really appreciated that perspective. I think that that's great. Now, I want to segue for a second into the differences between anxiety and depression, because I do think that there's maybe misnomers about maybe feeling the symptoms of one and thinking you have another. Especially, I am not an advocate of pharmaceutical companies directly advertising to consumers in our country. I'm dead set against
it. Oh my God, it's so insane.
We're one of the few countries in the world that allow it. But now our teenagers are asking for things by name, and I do believe that sometimes people do believe in this silver bullet. And I don't. And I believe in medicine. My son was saved by medicine. But I also believe in integrative health, as do you. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So let's first start with, what's the difference between anxiety and depression? And what are the signs? And can you explain the differences for us?
Sure. And they make common bedfellows. So they're not always together, but they can overlap. So to me, anxiety is more about perseverating over something that's scaring you, repetitive thoughts, worry, elevated heart rate, sweaty palms, anxious stomach, headaches. This is like all examples of high levels of cortisol and adrenaline in your body, which amp up your heart rate and your whole nervous system. So anxiety can be as small as like just a little worried to not leaving your house because it's the only place that's safe. That's a huge spectrum, but those are the spectrums of anxiety. Depression is more of a hopelessness, a sadness that feels overwhelming. And it just kind of mutes out the rest of the stimuli. And one of the most important things I think for people to understand about depression, and I didn't get this until I really worked with depression for a long time. I remember telling my depressed patients, like I was saying, go out, smell the flowers, and be outside, just take a drive, whatever it is that makes you feel good, just do it. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned is that's like asking me to grow my hair blonde and become 5'6". Mm-hmm. Come on, blondes have more fun. Everybody knows it. And it's that hard for a depressed person to get out of bed. Yeah. And go and do something. It's physically impossible sometimes.
Even painful, physically.
Painful. And then that can also spark the anxiety, because now you're out and you're either overwhelmed or you're just, again, there's like a film around you that disconnects you.
Yes.
So depression presents with symptoms like either lack of sleep or excessive sleep, or overeating, undereating, isolation. Those are the symptoms of depression.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I'd like to say we all haven't felt some sort of feeling of that in some sort of way in our life, but we all have. We've all felt pretty hopeless, I'm sure, at some point in our life, be it a traumatic experience that led us to that, or something that just happened in our life and we're starting to feel that way. When do we when do we start to look for help? When do we know we're in trouble? When do we know that it's an anxiety or a depression that is a normal course of action, because something has happened? How do we differentiate that to know when to ask for help?
I think when you've noticed that your life is starting to change, that your world is getting smaller, and that can be on a very micro level. And unfortunately, when people ignore the smaller signs, it ends up being really huge and overwhelming. And friends start to worry, and people start talking to you or possibly not talking to you because they don't want to upset you. But if your life isn't feeling like you want life to feel, do something about it. Get help.
Yes.
Because if you think of the physical body, if your leg is broken, obviously you're going to seek help. But what if you just have a small rash there? Do you ignore that? If you get a splinter, it needs attention. So
Yeah, you have to remove it or it will be infected. And yeah, exactly. Move through your body, be absorbed potentially by your body.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's wild. Okay, so let's just get into the book because this is practical tips. This book is built with hope. You know what I mean? Literally at its core, which I love, and I want to talk about that. So let's talk about the book. Let's talk about the missing piece. I love that you call it. She spells it the missing piece. P-I-E. Do you spell it P-E-A-C-E?
yeah, like peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly, which I love. The missing piece. I want to make sure I wasn't all of a sudden making that up because I didn't have the book right here in front of me.
No, the other one's a Shel Silverstein poetry book. So
I love that. I love that. Exactly. Which is a great poetry book. And he's a great author. So the missing piece, which you named your book, which I love, the missing piece as in peace of mind. But you talk about rewiring our brain, reducing anxiety and recreating our life. And I want to just talk about really what's in this book. What are people going to get from this book? And the practical tips that you kind of have in it. Like, just give us a snapshot of it.
sure. Well, I run an anxiety and depression center called The Missing Piece,
Yes.
spelled the same way.
Yes.
And the reason why I started this book is when people come to my center, they come for 9 to 30 hours a week. Insurance covers it for many people. I also have a charity that if you can't afford it, you can apply to the charity.
The Few Foundation, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
Pathways for Health and Emotional Wellness, or Phew.
I know. PHEW, Few. She's very
Right?
cute with her piece and her fuse. Phew. Doesn't everyone love a few?
So aside from my ego always wanting to write a book, but just never knowing what to write about, I have so many people say to me, you should franchise, or why don't you open up a place in Philadelphia or Florida or Montana or whatever. And because I practice what I preach, and because I really, really like being in my backyard, and I really love my downtime, I have no desire to be that busy at this age. So I wrote a book that encompasses the things that I teach my clients. So when we talk about rewiring your brain, I go back to that corn maze we were talking about earlier. And that identifies where your ghosts, where your lions, where all your fears or depression are coming from, where your trauma is being sprung from.
Yes.
And honoring those, finding out what purpose they serve for you, and then rewiring your brain so that with different methods, ways to engage the brain, to change those feelings. And then that naturally reduces your anxiety and your depression and your trauma. And so that second part is where you're practicing it in life. You're out there, you're doing it, you're seeing how the tools apply to you. And then I really believe, when people sit on my couch and they are crying and they're like, I wish I could believe what you say is true. I'm like, I wish I had a crystal ball to show you. And I can't promise you or guarantee you, but in my experience, we all have the ability to create the life we really want. And that doesn't mean jetting off to, Europe or what. It means your real life. So
Yes.
many of our fantasy lives are really not what we would want to do. Some people, oh, I wish I were a famous actress. Okay, do you want to get up at 5 in the morning, go to a soundstage, put on tons of makeup, say the same line over and over again for 8 hours? And then if your biggest dream comes true that you be recognized, now you spend the rest of your life hiding. It's like the ultimate paradox.
Right.
And life is so much about the micro joys. I cannot tell you how much joy this cup of coffee brings me in the morning. And so finding that path of what do you love to do on vacation? How can you incorporate that in your real life? And then also knowing that your energy produces the playing field of life that you are on. And when you are on a negative, frightened energy, that's what you're going to get on your radio station. It is a frequency. And I believe that 100%. And when you are in that more positive place, opportunities just seem to fly because you're on a different radio station. So this work really is about adjusting your frequency, which has a lot to do with loving yourself. So a lot
Yes.
of this book is about how we're our own worst critics, how judgmental we are of ourselves, the fear-based thoughts that we have, and reprogramming those and going out and getting the life you really want to live. Why not? You deserve it. Everybody deserves it.
100%. Beautifully said. I mean, like if I could bottle that and ship it, I mean, that is so true because I think, I'll give an example of myself that I sometimes, because of my childhood, I feel like people have hidden agendas. And so I will, and I'm a very robust thinker. My mind doesn't slow down much. I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things all the time. It's just the way and I've learned that that's a good thing about my mind, but I had to learn that what else could be true. That's what I ask myself all the time. That's the question I ask myself. I've learned to ask myself that because I think I make up someone's hidden agenda. Now, if they have a hidden agenda, I've also learned that's on them.
Right.
That's on me. Right.
It's not personal.
That's right.
And the four agreements illuminate this really well, taking nothing personally and not making assumptions. Because when we're looking for hidden agendas, it's never like, oh, maybe they're planning a surprise party.
No, it's negative. Exactly.
It's always negative.
I would like a surprise party. So funny. That's one of the few surprises I would like. Yeah. So, but I love that because The Four Agreements is a great book. If anybody hasn't read it, and I love it. I've read it probably over 100 times.
And I go back to that for just a second because it's an important tool. Tell your kids, tell your husband, I would love a surprise party.
Yes.
We often don't state what we really want, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's very true.
It's the opposite. It's healthy.
We do that, and then we get mad when we don't get what we want, and then we're bitter. Right. We're like, we don't get what we want. Exactly. My husband, I have to say, has thrown me some great surprise parties. I personally don't like surprises that much. I'm a very, I like to know what's happening, like put it out in front of me, that type of surprise. But you're right, and I really appreciate that because we don't speak out for what we want and we're shamed somehow too, or we don't want to ask for too much and we're embarrassed to ask, or there's a myriad of reasons why we do those things. But I love that. And I want to talk a little bit about reframing the mind, because I was going back to the Four Agreements, which was, I've read the book probably over 100 times. Like I read it over and over. So I know them by heart, but in the moment, like, how do you have to teach yourself. So my tool from that book was what else could be true. So once I start the agenda, me worrying about my dad's agenda, you know what I mean? From my childhood, I will say to myself, what else can be true?
So
And
you carve a new place in the maze, a
yes,
different place to go.
yes. And so that's my tool. You know what I mean?
A
Because
great tool.
right, generally speaking, I think that we need tools. And I think that there's a lot of books I read and there's a lot of, philosophical things that I read. But one of the things that just stuck with me recently, Dr. Gabor, I heard talking about, and he has a mind, he says that's a very busy mind. But when he looks back at his life, he said, someone asked, what would you do different if you could do anything different? And he said, I would do less. I would do less. And I love
Oh,
that you said that you're not going to do what everybody else expects of you. You're not going to open 17, franchise centers. You have what you have, and what you have is what is feeding you. And if you gave up more of yourself, you would take away from yourself, which is in fact giving to other people. So I'm really proud of you. And I find that to be super brave of you, especially as a female, because we tend to spread thin. We tend to prove, we tend to balance and juggle and handle. I mean, what word goes along with womanhood? Multitasker, right? Like, oh, I can multitask. I can have it all. These are not phrases that we use when we're talking about a masculine person. So it comes with the feminine. And so I think it's important that the two things you said that I want to remind people, that you do practice what you preach, but you're honest about it. My meditation, I do meditate every morning, but I don't sit in Indian style on my rug. You know what I mean? Some days I do. Some days it's in bed. Some days I go outside. Some days I just look outside.
yes.
Okay. I just
Yes.
look outside, or water. I'll meditate
Yes.
in the
Oh,
bathtub. It's the
yes.
other
I
thing that you
love
said.
watering.
I love it. The eye should see water. The body should take in water, and the spirit should float in water. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like it's
Yes.
such an important thing. And so I love that you said that you are serving you, and therefore you serve others, because I think we get ourselves in trouble that way.
Well, and there's a chapter in my book called The Fountain of You. And
Mm.
it's about how, if you're a selfish person and you only take, that water is stagnant and it's got the algae and all the gross stuff. But if you're a giver and you don't know how to receive, which is very hard to do, you're
Yes.
like, you're running on empty. But
Yeah.
if you allow yourself and learn how to receive, knowing that it's self-love, then your fountain is full and it just flows to others effortlessly. And it
Bubbling
feels
over.
good inside of you. And we really don't know the difference between, I'm generalizing, but many don't know the difference between selfishness and self-love. And they're very different. They're complete opposites. And they're often confused for each other. And it's
Yes.
an important thing to know the difference between.
Some of my hidden agenda, concerns also come from my own. I'm so hard on myself. So the hidden agenda comes from maybe not childhood stuff, but ego.
The inner
Ego
critic.
wants me to think somebody wants something, to get after me or whatever, versus have my best interest at heart. It's much
And I
easier to think
wonder if
negative.
some of it isn't um, genetic.
Yeah,
You may have inherited some of that. People who were deceived and hurt
my
in
daddy.
in your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And just also that need to fit in and be loved and be accepted. We all need it so much.
Yes.
And it really has to come from within. It's an odd catch-22, but it must come from within. And then people see what you reflect.
That's right. And then you attract what you reflect.
Yes.
It's all that math theory at the end of the day. I want to talk more about the Missing Piece Center for Anxiety, and I do want to talk more about the Few Foundation. And I'm going to save that for the end, because I really want you to let people know at the end where they can find you, and that's such a big part of it. because there is help out there and there are opportunities. And I love that you started by saying we take most insurance, because that's the opposite of what a lot of us hear today when it comes to therapy. And, so I think it's important. And one of my goals with Health Harmony and Heather is to be a resource for people that feel the way I feel, or looking for the things that I'm looking for sometimes, or like other people listening. So your work is so important. And I can't thank you enough.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I love you and you love me. I love it so much. Now, the other thing that really attracted me so much to you, because for me, everything is 360. I come at things through integrative nutrition, and you come at things through integrative mental health and wellness. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because in integrative nutrition, when I talk about eating healthy and treating your body healthy and for longevity and making the best choices that we can make. We all have choices. I just want you to know that you have a choice. And then what choice you make, how you feel afterwards, that tells you whether you made the right choice or not, right? So I talk about that when it comes to nutrition, and I talk about our plate. You can eat, I tell people, you could eat a salad of leafy greens that's colorful, and you have the right amount of healthy fats in it, and you're eating perfectly every single day. But your job is not, you're not happy in your job or your career, or at home, things are very difficult for you at home. You are not going to be a healthy person. You can eat as healthy as you want all day long, but in your plate of life, there are things that are out of balance. So yes, the greens and the good food is important, but so is your community. So is your career. And you look at it, you know what I mean? And can we talk
interesting,
about, yes.
Because we do have a nutrition component to the center. And what our wonderful person, Vince Leah, works with people on is primary food and secondary food. And your primary food is not the food on your plate. Your primary food is your emotional center, because based on what you're feeling, that's most likely going to inform what you put on your food plate.
Yes.
As you love yourself more, you are able to make different decisions. And yeah, I want to ask you your original question, because I
was going to say, so I talk about, it's not just about the food, and in health and wellness on your side, in mental health, it's not just about the therapy.
Oh God,
is what I was trying to say. So it's not just about the therapy. And so I want to talk about that. It's not enough to just do therapy, that there's more that people, because a lot of times people are looking for the silver bullet, you know what I mean? Like whether it's the diet pill or the therapist that's going to save everything. So can you talk about your plate of, yes. And, for several, many people, I'm so glad we have medicine, but as an integrative health coach and as an integrative therapist and counselor, it's not the first place you go. In fact, it's probably the last, like maybe, or for certain people, it's a last resort. Like, let's try all these other tools and tips and tricks that we have. And one in every situation is self-love. How do you feel about you?
And it's all a recipe, right? So at my center, first of all, I think I'm a good therapist. I think all our therapists are good therapists, but that's the tip of the iceberg. Going back to what I said earlier, you don't sit down a traumatized dog and talk about its triggers. So therapy is an important part, but you need to be in your frontal cortex to rethink how you're approaching life, which is what therapy is about. But most of us are trapped in our amygdala, in our limbic system. So in those 9 to 30 hours, people get massage, they get neurofeedback, they get music therapy where they learn how to put their feelings into music. There's different kinds of therapy. There's art therapy that expresses things in a totally different way. They get sound baths, they get movement, nutrition. So, and I'm sure I'm leaving something out. Spiritual stuff, Reiki,
they get love,
energy.
They get
So
love.
it's a recipe. And a lot of people will come to the center and they will start with the idea of, well, I've done yoga, I've done massage, it doesn't help. Well, it's putting it all together. It's creating a habit in your life where you're partially problem solving, you're partially self loving, and you're self soothing. Like
Yes.
you're learning how to self soothe and to connect with others. And the group therapy, I have this envelope in my office. It's the only envelope I have. And it says on the front, the only thing is, and the client goes over and gets it, and it says, I'd rather not do groups. And that's what I give to clients who 90% say, I'm just not comfortable in groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to that desk and take out that envelope, because we're often afraid of vulnerability, and we don't know how to connect, but we feel socially isolated and socially fearful. So it's this recipe that you put together. And the thing that I love about the missing piece, with the exception of neurofeedback and pulse electronic magnetic field therapy, these are all tools that we're teaching you to integrate into your personal life.
Yeah.
So that you're feeling good here, and you're taking what makes you feel good and you're making it out there. And that's why my book has a user manual. Apply these tools, not just theoretically, apply them physically to your life and see how it works. And so that's what I think is just so, and that's where the sensefulness comes in.
Yes.
So therapy is important. We all need it, but you've got to have a host. You've got to have a healthy
It's a piece of self-discovery. It's a piece of hope. It's a piece of peace.
Yes,
right?
exactly. It's the
right.
piece.
Because I think at the end of the day, the spirituality in all that, the connection in all that is truly self-discovery. When you can understand about yourself, feel connected to those around you, feel connected to the beautiful world that we have, feel more connected to our maker, and feel safe in that environment and not fearful.
And connected to our bodies.
Yes. And understanding what our bodies are telling us, understanding what our anxiety is telling us and how to answer back.
Yeah.
And how to get the tools to answer back. Fantastic.
I can't tell you how much it affects our physical health, and how so many people come in with IBS and colitis and migraines,
all kinds of digestive orders, because our mood lives in our belly. Our emotions live in our stomach. Yes. It's our heart, but if you almost get in an accident or someone surprised you with a surprise party, you don't feel it in your heart, you feel it in your belly.
That's true. Our intuition, our gut.
Yes, our gut. And so we know when things are off, and if we're not willing to listen, our bodies are going to tell us, and it will start there.
Yeah.
We'll start there. All right, let's go back, because I could talk to you for 50 more hours. I'll open your center for you. I'd like to open a center just like yours. I mean, it's like, I'm like writing it down. I'm like, I do all those things on my retreats, but it's hard for me because I love what we do. It's just incredible. But, you have a short period of time, and then everybody goes back into the world. And I'm lucky because I get a lot of people come back on the retreats with me, and it's wonderful. But I do wish I had a place where you could, continue to let people come, all types of people. I love what you do. So let's talk about it. Where can people find you in totality? Tell them everything about the Peace Center and about the Few Foundation, because for those few that are looking for help and feel like it is out of their reach, you have answered that call as well. So talk about that, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So the missing piece is in Agora Hills. And it's something that people come to, as I said, several hours a week. Most people are local, but we have people drive 2 hours, and we have people who are capable enough to stay at a local hotel and attend for a few months and really get the job done. But if you want to find the missing piece, you can look that up, PEACE in Agora Hills. You can also Google my name.
California, Agora Hills, California.
Yes, sorry, adjacent to Los Angeles. Agora Hills, You can also look up Laura Rhodes-Levin. The Few Foundation is actually less than a year old because we had a client who his insurance cut him off. He had been molested as a child. He's in his 50s. And he was doing really intense work, and then insurance cut him off. And he luckily had enough money, and he was driving 2 hours to come in. So he called me last year and he said, what if I could raise like $12,000? I want to pay it forward. And he called me back and said, we raised $75,000, but you have to be a 501c3. So I was like, I trust the universe. I'm like, okay, so this is my next venture. So I opened up the Few Foundation. We're having our first Friends Raiser on November 16th. So for that, you can go to Few, PHEW, mentalhealth.org. And you can donate there. And we also are having a raffle right now. There's only 300 tickets being sold, so your chances are good. But for $100, you get 5 nights at a Marriott or Ritz-Carlton in Hawaii and 2 round-trip airfare. But just to donate, I mean, you can save a lot in your taxes, and know that you really are saving people's lives, yes. Sometimes from the grips of death, and sometimes just for the ability to live a free and happy life.
Yes, and don't we all deserve that?
If you're not local, you can take me with you everywhere you go.
Yeah, hold up that book of yours. I see it over there.
And the reason I wrote this book is these are all my individual stories. I hate it when people preach to me. So I talk about all the things that I was afraid of. And I tell the story. Hopefully I make you laugh a little. And then the tool to help reframe it. And then the exercises, which you don't have to do, but when you apply them to yourself, it's much more easy.
I'm going to do what you say. Listen to you. I think I'm going to do what you say, Laura Rhodes-Levin. Hold that book up high, girl. Hold it up high. All right. And I don't have my copy. It's beautiful. I love it. I love it so much. So I appreciate you so much for your time and your energy and your commitment and your honesty and your own self-care so that you can give love to the people that you give the love to that need it so much. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thanks for what you do. And I'd love to come and check out The Missing Piece. And so I might have to put that on my list of things to do.
Anytime, we would love to have you. The same goes in return, Heather. Thank you for what you do. Thank you to your audiences for listening and viewing for their own mental health and well-being. It's one of the best activities you can do. So thank you so much for having me on.
We're better together. I love it so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. You too.